Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our short webinar with an update on California's Marine Protected Area Network petitions. We're going to get started in just a minute, but wanted to welcome folks into their room. So let's see. And we have a pretty short program, but we wanted to share a really great new tool, a new resource with updated information about potential proposed changes to California's Marine Protected Area Network. So, Nora, do you want to go ahead and share your slides? Again.
Can you see them now?
And I can't see them. Let's see.
It says that they're sharing.
Okay, great. I see. Perfect. So hopefully people can see them. All right, great. So my name's Laura Dehan. I'm the State Director for Environment California and Environment California Research and Policy Center. We're a statewide environmental organization that is powered by public support, and we are set up to protect our air and our water and to protect the most beautiful places in the state. And I'm joined today with a number of other advocates who are dedicated to protecting our ocean. And we wanted to provide an update as well as a new tool, a new resource that we've put together to provide updates about potential changes to California's Marine Protected Area Network. So California's coast and ocean is one of the best parts of living in our state. It's definitely the thing that most people think about when they think of California. They think of our beautiful ocean and coastline. And it is a place where we have so many of our best memories. If you live in California, you have, I'm sure, been to the beach, gotten to enjoy the peace and tranquility that comes with being by the ocean, and gotten to appreciate the incredible marine life that also calls it home. California is a biodiversity hotspot, so we have so many amazing wildlife that live off our shores. We have sea turtles, the Pacific leatherback sea turtle that calls California's coastline home for part of the year. We've got incredible marine birds and fish, and also sea otters that are incredibly cute that live off the California coast. And for, although our ocean is incredibly beautiful, we're also seeing increased threats to California's ocean ecosystems, from climate change to pollution that's increased, especially plastic pollution. There's incredible biodiversity loss and habitat loss that we've seen all around our planet, but especially offshore in our ocean. And with all of these threats, there's a real need for action to protect our ocean. One of the best tools that we have to protect our ocean is really conservation, right? Protecting places the way that we do on land with our national park system or state park system. We can set aside whole regions of our ocean ecosystem as marine protected areas, which are like underwater refuges where destructive activities are off limits and where ocean life can have a real refuge, a place where they can thrive. And California has led the way in creating these marine protected areas. We established a Marine Protected Area Network as a result of a law that was passed in 1999, the Marine Life Protection Act, that really was unique in setting aside a comprehensive network of marine protected areas offshore. And that network has been in place now for more than 10 years. The state has undertaken quite recently a decadal management review where they've evaluated how that marine protected area network is working. And as a result of the decadal management review, there was a whole series of recommendations that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has put forward. One of the most important recommendations and the piece that got the most overwhelming public support for immediate action was the step called adaptive management, an adaptive management process. And that's actually part of the law that was written and passed by the legislature in 1999 to undertake an adaptive management process to evaluate the effectiveness of the network and make changes when needed. As you might imagine, there's been a lot of changes to our ocean health over the last decade plus. Certainly since 1999, when the Marine Life Protection Act was passed, there's been significant changes, especially in light of climate change. And so having a comprehensive, effective process to evaluate what are the impacts of those changes and how do we adapt our marine protected area network to meet the current challenges is really crucial, which is why there was so much public support for that action. And as a result of that, the state opened up the process for the first time ever of allowing organizations like ours to submit petitions for updates or changes to the current marine protected area network. And so that process is underway. There were more than 20 petitions submitted about a year ago now. I think it was I think it was September of last year that they opened up the process, and then December is when the petitions were due. And so I think that many of our organizations were, although we definitely wanted to see an adaptive management process happen, we were a little bit caught off guard by the idea that it was really up to the public and organizations like ours to evaluate the health of the network and figure out what we needed to do to make sure it's still working. And so many of us undertook a very rapid and thorough outreach effort to the top marine scientists to figure out what are the biggest threats to our ocean and what are the big things that we need to do to make sure our marine protected area network is still working as it's supposed to do to protect marine life. And so for example, Environment California teamed up with Azul. We have one of the speakers from Azul on this webinar today as well. And we put forward a petition with the support of dozens of the top marine scientists, really targeted at protecting the kelp forest habitat. Kelp forest is a really important part of our ocean off the coast of California. But unfortunately, we lost more than 90% of the kelp forest habitat in the last decade, really as a result of a cascading set of ecosystem impacts, really made worse by the marine heat wave event that happened between 2014 and 2016. And really since then, we saw this big kelp forest die off, which is alarming and concerning. And although we're going to need to have a multi-pronged approach to addressing that problem, one really clear-cut thing we can do right now to help make sure that kelp forest has the best possible opportunity and the best chance of doing well is to actually expand the marine protected area network to encompass the healthy, stable kelp forest habitat to give it the best shot we can. And so that was one petition that we put forward. But as I said, there was a lot of other petitions that organizations proposed with a huge number of bits of feedback from the community and from scientists. Because it was such a big effort that happened, our groups teamed up to put together a story map that's a new resource, and we wanted to release that today. And this is a really key time because organizations like ours have until the end of this year to solicit feedback, and we have to submit any changes to our proposals by early January. And so we wanted to hold this event, share the story map, and invite feedback between now and the end of the year to make sure that we have the best possible proposals to consider for the state to consider over the course of 2025 when they're going to be evaluating these proposals. So that's the background. That's the reason that we're holding this event today. And the next slide has the list of speakers. So I just wanted to run through that quickly. We've got an esteemed set of speakers. Sandy Aylesworth, who's the Natural Resources Defense Council Director of the Pacific Initiative, is going to be speaking next. And then on her team is Rob Vergara, NRDC Ray Ocean Conservation Fellow, who's actually going to give us a quick tour of the story map. Then we'll hear from Tomas Valadez from Azul. He's the California Policy Associate. And we also have Anupa Asokan, who is the founder and director of Fish On, which is a new organization. And so we'll get to hear from all of these speakers in a moment. So now let me just hand it over to Sandy Aylesworth.
Thanks so much, Laura. And I wanted to give an extra special recognition to the many of you who have joined today because of your interest in this incredibly important issue of ocean conservation in California. We're all the speakers here, and I imagine many of you are really excited about the opportunity that this adaptive management process presents. And so here we are to talk about it, and we're looking forward to your questions later on. Taking a step back from Laura, I just wanted to share a bit about some of the threats that are facing California's ocean. It's really important to consider these threats as we embark on this first ever adaptive management process of California's Marine Protected Area Network. I'm going to now just zoom back and talk about what we know about threats to biodiversity globally in the ocean. The three major drivers of biodiversity loss in the ocean are first, overfishing, often industrial overfishing. The second major driver of biodiversity loss in the ocean is habitat loss. So things like land use change or habitats being used for oil and gas drilling, for example. And then the third major driver of biodiversity loss in the ocean is climate change. And as you all are probably aware, we, despite California's incredible environmental leadership in the oceans, California's waters are not exempt from those stressors and those drivers of biodiversity loss. So I'm just going to talk about some of the impacts that we're already seeing in California waters and then some of the expected stressors. Again, all as context as to why this adaptive management process is so important and why we really want to embrace this opportunity to both strengthen the current MPA network and also expand it. So just some stats for you. There are roughly 30 species of threatened and endangered animals that are in California's ocean ecosystems, including some of our beloved favorites like the California sea otter, bluefin and humpback whales, white and black abalone, Chinook salmon, and marbled murrelets. Roughly 90% of California's tidal marshes have been lost from fill and water diversion. About 90% of our historic eelgrass beds have disappeared over the last 75 years. Many of you know from going to the beach that many of our beaches have been replenished, groomed, or armored, and some are some of the most disrupted ecosystems in all of California. And then Laura just already talked about the incredibly pervasive changes we've seen to California's kelp ecosystems. Also, many of you know California has a number of national marine sanctuaries, including the recently declared Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, which is a really exciting development. Unfortunately, however, those sanctuaries condition reports, with the exception of Chumash because it was just designated, those condition reports, which are reports that show indicators of ecosystem health, show that 70% of habitat and wildlife indicators had received a fair to poor or poor rating. This shows that much of the habitat and wildlife resources within the national marine sanctuaries are experiencing measurable, severe, and widespread degradation. And then there was recently a scientific synthesis of the 50 largest MPAs in the US, and it found that California's national marine sanctuaries were only minimally or lightly protected. And this is a quote from that paper, unlikely to deliver substantial positive outcomes for species, habitats, or human communities. So what is causing these impacts that we're seeing? There have been studies on that categorize the major stressors on California's oceans. There was a study on human impacts of the California current ecosystem, and it mapped 25 human impacts across various regions in California. And it demonstrated that most areas in California waters are experiencing greater than 10 stressors in each of those areas. There's much to say about the specific stressors, but I will just leave it at a higher level for now to say that we've already heard what some of the most likely stressors are. Looking at future stressors, we need to consider the fact that, unfortunately, pressures on California's oceans are likely to increase. We have a freshwater scarcity problem in the state of California. So there is great interest in building new desalination plants, for instance. We also know that there is interest in sustainable aquaculture, which may be ultimately beneficial or provide an important food source, yet does constitute a significant change of habitat. We also have a really strong commitment to offshore wind energy development in California, which our organizations are very supportive of. However, that will lead to significant changes in the way that we use our oceans. So what do we do about all of this? Thankfully, the state of California is invested in strengthening its marine protections. I was just in Calif, Colombia, with a huge delegation from the state, including Secretary Wade Crowfoot and OPC Executive Director and Deputy Secretary Jen Eckerly. And they were there showcasing California's ambition on oceans and have stated a commitment to really bolstering its oceans protections and wanting to be a subnational leader. This, of course, is incredibly important. This leadership is what I mean to say is incredibly important in the context of the incoming Trump administration, which will likely seek to weaken federal protections for ocean waters. So again, this adaptive management process is an exciting opportunity to safeguard against some of these many forthcoming stressors. And now for the exciting part, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Rob Vergara, who is going to provide everyone a tour of the mapping tool that our organizations have created. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Sandy. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Are folks able to see that?
Yep.
Yep. All right, so here is the splash page for the story map that our organizations have collaborated upon. We have this wonderful artwork by the artist Sally Deng, showcasing the beauty of California's coastline, as well as the many folks who make use of it in non-consumptive ways and the creatures that live in and alongside the waters. So as a quick rundown, we have a few descriptions about the MPA network itself, as well as some context for the process that Laura and Sandy have described so far. And what we have here is 4 map frames that have divided the coast into different regions. So we have the North Coast region, the North Central Coast region, the Central Coast, and finally the South Coast. So to zoom in a bit more granularly here for the South Coast, each frame will have this legend that describes the different actions that we categorize each petition upon. So just to zoom out a little bit again, 20 petitions were submitted to the Fish and Game Commission last year for consideration and evaluation, but petitions can target more than one MPA. So all of the dots that you see here are the different requested actions within specific petitions. So we have 3 different categories: the red category, the yellow category, and the blue category. And just to clarify, the existing MPA network is outlined in the green over here. So those are existing MPAs, and all of the requested actions are represented by these dots. So the red ones essentially would either decrease the level of protection of an existing MPA, or in some way impair its function or level of protection. And the fun part about the story map is that you're able to click on these individual dots in order to see more detail. So we'll go ahead and click over here. So this is one MPA that would decrease the level of protection within an existing state marine conservation area, which is a step below the highest level of protection, which is a state marine reserve. Another example of this would be ones over here in the Channel Islands. So we would have Footprint State Marine Reserve, which again is the highest level of protection. And the current requested change here would be to allow recreational and commercial take of pelagic finfish. And just as a reminder, state marine reserves do not allow any type of take, including fishing. So in order to make this change, it would be decreasing the level of protection from a state marine reserve to a state marine conservation area, which explains why it would be categorized in our red category here. And then just to move on onto the yellow category, we should go over to the Central Coast. So we have a few yellow dots over here, and essentially this category is more of the mixed bag. So this requested action could increase protections for certain species by recategorizing a certain MPA into a higher level of protection, but having a stipulation in the request that would decrease protections for others. So let's go ahead and check this one out. So Edward F. Ricketts State Marine Conservation Area is one that is being targeted for change by petition. And so this one essentially would ask for recategorization of this SMCA into an SMR or a state marine reserve. So that is the one aspect where that would increase protections for certain species, because that would preclude take, i.e. fishing of a wide variety of species within this SMCA. At the same time, though, the petition also asks for allowing recreational and commercial take of sea urchins within the MPA, which would, in a sense, decrease protection. So that is why we have this intermediate category where we have a potential for increased protection within the MPA, but also another side effect that could be adverse for conservation purposes and MPA function. And just finally, to highlight the blue category, which would either add an MPA, improve MPA management, or just overall boost an MPA's level of protection. We can go ahead and zoom in on Environment California and Azul's own petition over here in Santa Cruz, which would be Pleasure Point proposed MPA. So this would add a new state marine reserve into the MPA network and have lots of conservation benefits potentially for the kelp forests in and around the area. And that would be, sorry, a total brain fart here, but that would overall improve the MPA network's functionality and general conservation benefits for kelp forests and the creatures that depend on it. So one thing to note is that this is a public process and it is ongoing. So our hope and purpose with this story map is to keep folks involved and to keep folks informed as the evaluations are going on for these petitions. So just to note, this is open to the public and feedback is recommended and welcomed by all of our organizations and all the folks who have submitted these petitions. And we also have links to the Fish and Game Commission website that would have the locations for where these meetings are occurring, as well as the agenda items and just ways to comment and participate as this goes on. So that would be the quick tour of our beautiful little story map here. And now I'll pass it off to Tomas Valadez, who is the California Policy Associate with Azul.
Thank you, Rob, and good morning, everyone. My name is Tomas Valadez. I am the California Policy Associate with Azul. Azul is a Latinx-led and serving grassroots environmental justice organization, with a focus specifically in working with Latinx communities to protect the ocean and coast. Azul has long advocated for strengthening our MPA network, as it is one of the best opportunities we have to protect our state's coast and ocean and increase resilience to climate change impacts. With this in mind, we were happy to join Environment California in co-authoring MPA petitions that aim to enhance protections for resilient, stable, and persistent kelp forest habitats, as well as those that help clear up enforcement issues within existing MPAs. Our ocean and coasts are under many stressors and face new emerging threats, which these petitions will help address. Our petitions have been met with strong support from NGOs, marine scientists, and over 17,000 Californians and counting. In fact, Azul's 2024 national poll, which is the second ever nationwide poll on Latino viewpoints on ocean protection and policies and recreation, found that Latino voters support more investments in protecting our ocean and coast. Our poll found that 89% of Latinos believe in protecting the environment as a means of protecting their communities. And 85% of Latinos agree that the government should implement the strongest protections for our ocean areas. More than half of Californians visit the coast at least once a year to spend time in community, swim, sightsee, walk, surf, kayak, and so much more. Strong marine protections are truly a prerequisite for equitable coastal access. And by making the ocean a healthier and more resilient to climate change, strong marine protections preserve everyone's ability to enjoy the ocean through a variety of recreational, cultural, and educational activities far into the future. Thank you all for joining today, and I would now like to introduce the founder and director of Fish On, Anupa Asokan.
Thank you, Tomas, and thanks to all of my colleagues at Environment California and RDC for inviting me to join and give some additional perspective to this process. Like Tomas said, my name is Anupa Asokan. I'm the founder of a brand new fishing interest organization called Fish On, and we work to bring conservation-minded anglers and spearfishers into ocean conservation policy with more of a solutions-oriented approach to protecting some of the places that we like to fish and like to recreate in. I would say most fishermen, most folks that use the ocean or hunt from the ocean, take from the ocean, participate in fishery management processes, right? These are ways that we manage the ocean that, the amount of fish that we can take, what we can take, how much. But there are limits to that process. Our fishery management process only really covers less than 1% of species in the ocean. So marine protected areas are a really important way that we can protect the other 99+% of things that we know about in California's coastal ocean, and do so in a way that everyone can continue to enjoy them into the future. Particularly given a lot of the challenges and stressors that Sandy highlighted earlier on. So there are a lot of fishing communities and folks that use the ocean and like to take from the ocean that also support these protected areas and places that we see as a way to invest in the future of California's ecosystems and the future of fishing, and ensure that we still have things that we can catch and teach our children to catch and the next generation can continue to enjoy. Globally, there's also been lots of studies that show protected areas, areas that are fully protected where you can't fish, have benefits to fishing communities. a study looking at some of these like long-lasting protected areas in Florida. Anglers outside of that protected area are catching trophy fish in record numbers, which is really cool. And these are big fish that are breaking records around the world. So a thing that we can look at either through this adaptive management process or as we look ahead to maybe the next 10 years of California's MPA network, I'd love to see adapting our network to make sure that they can better support fishing communities in California, particularly those subsistence fishing communities that really rely on the ocean for food security and are often concentrated on piers and jetties up and down the California coast. So this is a really important way that we can not only protect the health of California's coastal ecosystems, but also support the people that rely on the ocean to feed themselves and their families. I'll leave it there because I am sure we have lots of questions, but I think, Laura, I'll turn it over to you to lead that.
Great. Thanks so much, Anupa. And we wanted to share these resources, so we'll drop them in the chat as well. The first is just the new story map that we're releasing today, so you can play with it yourself and see all the different places that there's proposed changes. And then also wanted to highlight an incredible new resource that was just released a month ago from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. They've put together a story map where you can see up to the minute updates on the petitions that have been submitted and a lot more details. And there's also information there about the process and how to engage. And also wanted to note that all of our organizations, and I know a lot of the other petitioners, are really looking for feedback between now and the end of 2024 to make sure we have the best proposals possible. And I wanted to make one more note. There's incredible support around the state of California for our Marine Protected Area Network. In fact, the Public Policy Institute of California did a poll last year or this past summer that looked at the support for not only the existing Marine Protected Area Network, but expanding it, and found that more than 81% of Californians would support that. And that's also what we found from doing public outreach. There's just overwhelming support. And it's also worth noting that there's a separate process underway at the state where the Ocean Protection Council and the California state government has committed and actually passed legislation to showing that dedicated commitment to really protecting more nature and meeting goals of protecting 30% of our coastal waters as well as our land by the year 2030. And so we've already protected about 16% of our coastal waters to some degree through the Marine Protected Area Network, and about 12% are what is counted as kind of highly protected or fully protected. And so we definitely have a lot more ocean space that we need to protect to reach that goal by 2030. And the state has issued a pathways document, and they're working on finalizing their framework for how to meet those goals and get to what will count toward 30%. And I would say that if you look at all of the petitions and add them together, it actually only amounts to about 2% more of our coastal waters being protected. So even if all of these get approved, it would only get us, it would get us one step forward, which would be great to expanding ocean protections. But we also have a ways to go to get all the way there. Recently, the state legislature passed a resolution, ACR 210, that urged the state agencies actually undergoing that 30 by 30 planning process to really prioritize what we know works, which is the California MPA network, expanding that. So we can share those resources in the chat in a second, and we'll also send a follow-up with all of the links as well. But right now, I just wanted to open it up to questions if anybody had any questions for the group. And the first question I have here is, from Noah Haggerty at the LA Times. I'm surprised to see so many proposals advocating for reducing protections. Do we have a sense of what kind of organizations and stakeholders are proposing these? Any sense of how the state will likely rule here? Is CDFW potentially going to expand protections, reduce them, or try to strike a balance here? So let's see. Sandy, do you want to take that?
I was thinking, anyway, I would invite colleagues to step in. Yes, Noah, it's true. There's interest in weakening the network. Those proposals come from, I would say, largely fishing interests who are interested in opening up additional opportunities to fishing. If you click on the links, or sorry, if you click on the specific dots, you'll see the justification for the various proposals. So I guess I'll leave it there, but would invite colleagues to jump in on that question. And then just briefly to answer your question, the way the decision-making as we understand it is going to unfold for evaluations of the specific petition proposals is that there is the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will evaluate all of the petitions based on a variety of criteria. One important piece to note is that when the MPA network was established, there was a scientific task force that created guidelines for size and spacing of the MPA network, where they set out parameters to say, here's how big a California MPA should be, and this is the furthest distance it should be from other marine protected areas, because there was interest in making the series of MPAs function as a network so that there was connectivity between all of the MPAs. And so that there were these original scientific guidelines, and we are really encouraging in the evaluation to sort of revisit the way the current MPA network stacks up against those scientific guidelines, and to look for gaps. And then also to consider the fact that we now have these really obvious and significant impacts of climate change that are impacting the California's ocean and the network itself. So anyway, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife will review petitions in the context of scientific guidelines and climate change and a variety of other factors. And they will make a recommendation to the California Fish and Game Commission. There are 5 fish and game commissioners, and they essentially engage with the public and have a dialogue amongst themselves and then vote on the specific recommendations. I would say that we have some concern that there has not necessarily been recognition of sort of the need to expand or strengthen the network. So I would say that NRDC and the organizations on this webinar are concerned that we could actually see the network either weakened or not strengthened or enhanced in a meaningful way. Would others like to chime in?
I guess I would just add that this whole process over the last 10 years has given us so much valuable information about how our oceans have changed, the opportunities that MPAs actually bring to people that like to visit the coast and to the health of these ecosystems. And our ability to understand, right, like how the network can work better together, right? Is that spacing guideline still accurate now that we have better models to understand how they're connected and how ocean currents can help transport little fish larvae up and down the coast, or whatever the case might be. So I think we should also see this as an opportunity to continue to build on the science and our understanding of the ocean, and then ultimately how we engage with the ocean.
Thanks. And it looks like we had another question. Daniel Laura asked is there a place that describes in more detail why each petition is making the recommendation it does, and especially for these potential downgrades in protections? And so each petition was you had to submit a lot of documentation along with it, making your case. And so if you check out the CDFW resource, they actually link to the petition, so you can read in a lot more detail what was proposed. And then Paige asks, what's the state's process for evaluating and approving the petitions? I think Sandy kind of covered that. Although I guess we could add, there is a process underway. If you check out the most recent meeting of the Marine Resource Committee that just happened last week, they talked through initial evaluation of some of the what was called bin 1 petitions. They're kind of what California Department of Fish and Wildlife thought were the low-hanging fruit, easier to evaluate, less controversial petitions. And those, there's been some initial recommendations on those that will be discussed at the next Fish and Game Commission meeting in December 9th or 10th, I believe. And then the bin 2 petitions, which all of the ones that we've proposed, and I believe, a lot of the proposals to downgrade petitions have been put into bin 2. And so they're really going to start the evaluation of those in the new year. And there's going to be discussion about the process for that at the December meeting as well. And we're asking for a transparent process that's based on science and that includes community input. And that was a lot of the requirements for the petitions, when we submitted them as well. And so it's a little bit up in the air exactly how they're going to be evaluated and how it's going to go from here. And so we definitely encourage engagement, and all of our groups are going to be participating in the process. But the more public participation, the better the process will go, I think. So are there any other questions that we didn't cover?
There's another one from Noah.
And so Noah asked, does that 2% increase in protected areas from these proposals include just the proposals to increase protection or the net gain? That would actually just be just the proposals to increase protections. So if all of the petitions were approved for some reason, then we wouldn't reach 2%, that 2% increase.
And I just wanted to add one piece to Laura's response there, is just in terms of context. A couple of the panelists have already mentioned that California has this 30 by 30 initiative, and that initiative basically says that California needs to increase its ocean conservation protections by 500,000 acres by 2030. And so this 2% of strengthened protections would add about 44,000 acres, which sounds like a lot, but as you can tell, relative to the 500,000 acres that's needed, is still well short of what the state has committed to achieving. So we're really excited about the prospect of having these additional 44,000 acres, but we still are looking at the fact that the state has committed to achieving more.
Yeah, and I think if you speak with folks at Ocean Protection Council, as we have, they've indicated that the only way that new marine protected areas will be added into our existing marine protected area network is through adaptive management at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And that's how, what we've been told. And there are other ways that they've described there where we might have an opportunity to protect more of the ocean, from strengthening sanctuaries, the national marine sanctuaries, to other ways of counting protected areas. And so they're in the middle of kind of finalizing that. And we are concerned that there's a risk that areas that don't meet the international global standard for highly protected, to really meet that standard of protecting more nature that was laid out, in the 30 by 30 agreements could be counted. And we want to make sure that California's protected areas stay as strong as possible so that we can continue to lead the way in showing the world what it means to protect our ocean, our coastal ecosystems. And so we'll definitely follow up with an email, including a video from today. I'm not sure we'll have a transcript, but if you have a particular question or follow-up, please get back to us and we'll try to answer. And thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll keep you updated.
Thanks for joining, everyone.